So before we dive into the book and talk about why you decided to write it and what you hope to achieve with it, I want to ask you first of all about your own personal journey with depression. Um, when was that exact moment when you kind of realized something's wrong here and I need to look for professional help to try and solve this?
Yeah, so I think I was like, the whole thing with this journey is that I realized that I'm quite lucky. Like a lot of the circumstances around asking help or or sort of opening up my feelings, I think they sort of happened by chance rather than me actually having the courage myself to say to my mother or father that I'm feeling this way and like I need help. It was just like, I think it was in July of 2015, after like 7 months of continuous sort of feelings of confusion, of sadness, of and I think numbness, and I think confusion were like the big two. Like I wasn't, I had no answer to why I was crying or answer to why I was feeling sad, but I was just feeling sad. And by that point, I had got to the stage where I just thought, okay, this is it. Like, this might be it. Like, as in, I might have to live this way forever. Like, and I just had to make peace with that itself. But I mean, luckily, in a sense, I ended up crying in front of my mother and father, like, like I didn't want to cry, but it just came out.
Yeah.
And then they were completely shocked, and then we went to the hospital, and then we saw a doctor, and they diagnosed me with clinical depression, and like that was the moment where I was like, okay, so this actually has a name. Like it's not something that is not defined, or it's not it's confusing. Like there is, like, this has happened to people before, and like it can happen to people after as well, and there is some sort of a procedure to follow, like to either try to get better or try to manage your emotions a lot better. And I think so that was the moment where, like, getting the diagnosis was like, it just defined what I'd been feeling for 7 months, like in secret, really. And and then so I think so, rather than me opening up, it was just pure luck, really, that I cried in front of them, and then they were willing enough to take me to the hospital, and then we got the diagnosis.
Up until that point, what was kind of stopping you from openly talking about this with your parents or your close friends? What were the kind of thoughts that were going through your mind that were preventing you from talking about this?
I think the first thing comes is like, I was just quite confused. Like, I didn't know how to articulate it myself. So like, I don't know how to go to someone and say, oh, look, I'm just waking up in the morning and starting to cry. Like, I didn't know, like, if that was a thing. I didn't know if that was a common thing. I didn't know if that was just me. And it was just quite embarrassing, like, as a person, to, because I think we always like to show our successes, or the good things about our life, but things like this, I think it's quite embarrassing. Like, I'm not afraid to admit that now. Like, I felt embarrassed, I felt ashamed, I felt guilty to a certain extent, that given all the external gifts that I have, like, I have food on my plate, I have a shelter, I have a loving mother and father, but still I'm feeling this way. Like, I think so that was so. And then, like, with all of that, I just thought, okay, it might just be a phase. It might die down in a few weeks, months, etc. So, but then sort of, and when I spoke to the doctor and said, he asked, how long has it been going on for? And I said 7 months. And he said, yeah, okay, then this is a real issue that we need to try and address. This is not something that we can just brush off as a phase. I think, there is a procedure to try and help. I think so. I think, yeah, it was just more embarrassment and more
Okay.
confusion about, I didn't know myself on how to articulate it to anyone.
Do you think it was an element of, am I just feeling down like a normal person would, like anyone would, or
Yeah.
is there something more to it? Just kind of knowing the difference between the two.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't know the difference then. So yeah, I just assumed that it was just, oh, maybe I'm just like feeling whatever anyone else would feel, but maybe I'm just taking a bit longer than
To
others.
recover from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think at all that being from the South Asian community has anything to do with the way that you responded to it? So I don't know about you, but the way I was brought up was to kind of just get on with things. I'm very lucky enough to have a good relationship with my parents, but I also know there is an element of kind of just get on with it. So what was it like for you?
Yeah, I think three things were at play here. I think one, the Asian background, being an Indian born in India as well. I think like that is it's, yeah, as you said, I think it's much more about getting on with things. And I have two examples at home, for example. Like, they've had so much struggle on the outside, but then they've been able to push through and be where they are today, and sort of be very kind-hearted, be very happy, and be very sort of joyous with life. And I think so. I think that was obviously an impact about me not wanting to sort of open up and be. But I think also another big one where I've realized only in maybe actually the past few months is that being a male, being a man, it's there's that classic saying that boys don't cry or men don't cry. So then that just hurts your whole identity. Like, so okay, so I'm crying, so am I not a boy or man, or like what am I? And I think that really has a huge impact. And because I think there's also a statistic that I think there's more females that go through depression, but men are much more likely to commit suicide than females because of that sense of guilt and shame attached to it. And you can't really they don't feel like they can open up to people in that sense. And also being an only child, I think that was also something that again I've only realized in recent months that probably had an impact, because I don't really have anyone like other than my mother and father. And as much as they are my friends, like, there is still that relationship. It's my mother, it's my father. Like they can be your best friends. And for me, my mother is my best friend, or in that sense, but there is still that barrier in a sense that it is your mother, it is your father. So how do you open up on these types of issues, and how will they react? And I think, at least for my view on our generation of parents, is that they've worked their whole life for us, and they've worked sort of their whole outlook on life is based on us, and their whole joy from their life is based on us. And suppose if I say that I'm feeling very confused and sad and guilty or ashamed and everything, I think, but then how will they react? That was a fear that I had. And so so those three things I think were at play there.
I completely understand that. And now I kind of want to move on to the writing process, the process of you writing letters to yourself. Did you kind of already know the therapeutic aspect of writing letters to yourself, because you were in the world of journalism and you kind of acknowledged your love for writing, or was it something that your therapist recommended that you did? How did writing the letters come about?
Yes, I think I would have done it if I was not in journalism anyway. I think I would have published, I would have written letters, I would have done something like this, even if I wasn't a journalist. But I think, and it wasn't something that the therapist prescribed or suggested that I do. But I think for me, because I've only written the letters recently in the last year, and I think looking back, I think I would have appreciated a friend like me, like in a sense that I didn't have that person. And I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not saying that's also my destiny and my sort of openness to people to sort of, if I'm not open myself, how can I expect sort of others to be open and understanding about my situation? So I think I'm not blaming anyone, but I think I would have appreciated a friend like me a lot at that and those difficult moments. And I think so that's why and for me, writing is the way that I can express myself the best,
Yeah.
because I'm not great with word speaking, but I can write much better than I can speak. So I think so that just came naturally, and I thought let's give it a shot and let's see if I can come up with something that is useful in that sense.
It's funny you should say all of that, because to me, when I was reading your book, it did come across like a supportive friend. There are a lot of books out there that kind of say, if you're not doing things this way, then you're doing it wrong. This is the only solution to how you're feeling. But your book doesn't say that. Your book explains your experience, provides what worked for you, but you acknowledge that it worked for you because of the circumstances you were in. You don't say, this is the answer, this is the solution to depression. And I love that. And it's something that I want to come back to a bit later on as well. But after you wrote these letters, what made you think, okay, now I want to publish it, and I also want to donate the proceeds that I get from this book to a mental health charity?
Yeah, so I think again it comes from so I'm no longer on medication for depression. I was for I think 3 or 4 years, and I have not as regular sessions as I did in the past. Like I used to have every week, but now I don't. So in a sense, I'm able to manage my emotions and feelings a lot better than I did 3 or 4 years ago. And I think so. The things that I'm doing now, it comes from a sense of responsibility, to again to try and be that supportive friend that I was mentioning, and try and be that friend for others that I never had or I didn't get the opportunity to have. And I think so. I think that's why I wanted to publish it, just because because I can't reach everyone like by talking. So I thought this way of publishing it in writing, I think, would be much more effective. And I think so yeah, that's why I published it. And in terms of the donation to the Mental Health Foundation, I think, again, looking at my circumstances now, I have a job that pays that pays me well enough, and I'm not in desperate need of the money.
Yeah.
And also I think that money is much better used by a foundation, by a charity that's trying to help. Because I think, especially coming out of this situation that we're in the world at the moment with COVID, I think the hidden pandemic is about the mental health crisis for especially young people. And I think whatever we can do to help that situation, I'll try and do it. So I thought, again, it would be a nice thing to try and say that whatever I get from this book is not coming to me. It will go to the a charity, and I think that also helps it to sell more in a sense, because people know that they're not making me rich, right? They're making they're at least
there's good intention behind it all.
Yeah.
There are three main letters from the book that I want to focus on, and the first letter is Dear Thoughts About the Past or Future. I think this is a letter that almost everyone can relate to, because we have all, at some point in our life, spent a considerable amount of time worrying about past decisions, feeling regret, or even worrying about things that are to come and that haven't even happened yet. And so I want to know from your perspective, what were the kind of things you were worrying about with regards to the past or future? Was it career? Was it relationships? What was it?
I think it was just much more about the illness and the diagnosis, like sort of how did it come to this point that I'm having to be on medication to basically survive, to basically wake up in the morning and not feel like an emotional wreck. I think that was the sort of the issue with the past. I was trying to sort of figure out a time or a specific event that caused this, but I couldn't find anything. And that's another thing that I've seen in a few examples, reading about people who've had depression, is that sometimes it comes along uninvited, basically, and doesn't leave when you want it to. And I think that's something that takes some time to get used to, in a sense that, because we're always looking for a cause for things, right? We're always thinking that, this happened because in the past there was something that caused this. But with a thing like this, there was unfortunately or fortunately no cause, no external cause, at least, that I could find. And I think, again, it's like, it's quite different to a physical illness, in a sense that a physical illness, like if you say, touch wood, we don't, but say if you break your leg, if we break our legs and we have a bandage on it, it's somewhat like a badge of honor, in a sense. Like we've all seen, like, especially in school time, right? Like you'd get people to sign it. You'd get people to sign it with different colors and things. And draw things, and it looked cool, right? But suppose you have depression, would you really go to school the next day with a bandage around your head and just say, I have depression? Like, I don't think it doesn't work like that. And I think, and unfortunately, there's not some, with a broken leg, like we all have sort of different legs, but in a sense, like it's like 10 to 12 weeks is a common time frame to repair or recover. But with depression, it can range from any time to any time, basically, and it really just depends on circumstances. So I think that's what I was looking for in terms of the past, and in terms of the future. I think in terms of for the past, I was looking for a cause for depression, and in terms of the future, I was thinking about how will I live with this for the rest of my life. Like, suppose this doesn't go away, suppose these feelings don't go, how would I manage to just manage to just live, basically. And because I cannot depend on my mother and father forever, I can't depend on medication forever, can't depend on a doctor forever. So I think that was the fear about the future, in a sense. Just how long will this last, in a sense? And is there a chance of it getting better or worse? I think that was the fear.
In the book, you mention how you kind of helped yourself to overcome this, and you mentioned that you tried to focus yourself on the present. And you hear focus on the present being thrown around all the time. But in reality, if you actually look at how often we are actually in the present. It's actually not that much of the time that we're awake. So how do you do that? How do you focus yourself in the present?
Yeah, I think another point to mention here is that with a lot of the letters in the book, I mentioned that I'm still struggling with it. Like, it's not like I figured it all out in a sense, and like I'm giving this advice or suggestion, but I'm also in that journey with you. Like, I'm in that position with you. So in a sense, about focusing on the present, I think is really, really challenging, as you mentioned. And I think it's not something that is easy, but I think sometimes I find the exercise of um, like touching things or feeling things, and like touching a table, or like feeling your feet on the ground, and sort of your senses, like your smell, your taste, or your sight, or things like that. I think it can bring you back to a reality that sometimes my thoughts at least take me to a place where it might not be real. I might think about the future, how bad it might be, or how bad it might look, but obviously it's not happened yet. But to bring myself back from that, I think, just sort of like taking looking outside the window, or just feeling something, and then, okay, I'm back, sort of thing. Like, just a small trigger to bring yourself back to, okay, I've got now this to do at work, or I've got this to do in the evening. And I think that helps at times. And I think, but it's incredibly challenging. But yeah, I think that's something that I try and do more and more, and I'm doing it a lot more than I did in the past. But I still like to do more as well. So I think, but yeah, I think that's one thing that I try.
Do you think the lockdown period has made it worse for people in terms of thinking about the past or future? Because we're spending a lot more time alone with our thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's hurt a lot of us thinking about the future, because we're not sure when this ends and how this ends, for everyone. And like, obviously, sort of young people are very ambitious. They have this. They have the aspirations. They have sort of goals and dreams and things that they want to achieve, and sort of in an instant they were sort of taken away for a year, basically. And so I think a lot of people have struggled with the fact that, oh no, this has happened now. Like, what happens in the future? And I think, so it's had a huge, I think it's had a huge impact on thoughts about the future. In terms of past, I think past might be a good thing in a certain sense, like thinking about happy memories at times, or like thinking about times when you were out with your friends, or like out celebrating, or like things, and thinking about those times can help. But I think the future is a difficult thing to sort of look at, because we're just not sure about how things will pan out, right? And when it will change, and how it will change, and what will the world be post this pandemic.
It's funny because before all of we had this conversation, we were talking about being in our prime, and the fact that we're 25 and we're stuck at home. When we think back to what we thought we'd be doing at the age of 25, it was probably not this, and that's the thing that I think is affecting a lot of people. The second letter I kind of want to focus on is Dear Biggest Self-Critic. And I think this letter is very important because with the rise of social media, it's easier than ever to compare your life to someone else's. But what we don't realize is that we're comparing our real life with someone else's larger than life almost fake image that they've put up on Instagram. And so I want to know from your perspective, was social media kind of fueling this this negative critic within you that was telling you that you weren't good enough, and was it fueling comparison?
I'm sort of inherently quite a negative person anyway, like before, without social media anyway. I think like I don't need social media to be a negative person. I think I am quite negative in that sense. And so I think I don't think social media has had that much of an impact on me. But I can definitely see why it can have an impact because of, like you mentioned, the comparisons, the feeling that everyone else has got their life sorted out with, they're already a celebrity by 24, or they're already famous by,
Yeah.
and they've already got thousands of followers, or they've already got millions of friends or whatever, and like you're sitting in your room or thinking. And I think so I can definitely see why it can have a huge impact. But for me, I think it was just like the negativity and this self-criticism sort of happened in day-to-day activities, more than seeing on social media someone being successful, because I think that's a great thing. If someone's successful, fair play to them, and they deserve that. They deserve that credit.
Yeah.
But I think the criticism for me, I think it was just that I was just struggling to do like basic tasks, like just I didn't have the energy to read or to because this happened during university, like, and I think and yeah, just to get up in the morning, like I didn't have enough energy sometimes. I didn't want to get up, or I didn't sleep enough, and sort of basic tasks like that. I think that was the more challenging aspect with criticism, that I felt that I'm struggling to do this. Like, how will I sort of after I graduate, how will I even adapt to the real world, as they say? And so I think that was more an impact. But I think definitely your point about social media is absolutely valid.
It's interesting you should say that, because often when I was planning out what to talk to you about, you'd immediately think bigger thoughts. You'd think bigger thoughts affected you. So thoughts about, say, career or relationships or something like that. But you've mentioned that it can be the smallest things. It can be day-to-day activities that end up affecting you. And that's really interesting. How do you then control these thoughts that tell you you're not good enough? How do you deal with them?
Yeah, again, I don't have an answer for this. It's an issue that I'm still trying to figure out myself, and it's I think like one of the things that I think is interesting for our generation is that we have an issue about sort of an issue of abundance. Like, in a sense, there's so many things out there, whereas I think previous generations, they had an issue of lack of resources or lack of abundance.
So
in a sense, so they sort of managed with what they had. But like now we have a choice. Like, it's quite daunting to like see like you're almost in like a field, like, and there's so many things that you can do. Like, where do you go? Like, in a sense, like if there's only a few things, then you have a choice of, say, 10 things. Okay, I'll do this. Like I'll go right instead of left. But now there's so many things. Like, what do you choose, and how to go about it, and how to just live your life. I think that's similar to somewhat the criticisms that we can have, because say you make one choice on one day and then it doesn't work out, then you think, oh no, what should I go back, and then should I try this one, or should I just keep on going with this one? And then so I think the issue of abundance is quite a big thing for us, and I think it's about navigating sometimes, like just going down one route and sort of having the patience and belief that it's, let me at least get to halfway, rather than making one 10 steps and then coming back and then seeing what choices there are again, like in a sense of having that just like, and that's where I think criticisms can come in, like you're seeing, and in your point about social media, for example, say you have 100 friends and they're doing 100 different things and you're somewhat not doing any of those things. Sort of, where do you go? Like, who do you follow? And is that your answer? Is that what will make you sort of fulfilled and make you satisfied with the way you're living your life? I think that's the big question mark that we have to ask ourselves, in terms of what is the life that I want to live? Because there is a lot of romanticism about living a life full of joy, activities, and being busy and things. But you know what? A 9-to-5 job is not a bad life. It's quite a nice life. Having a regular life is not bad. And I think I think that's also one thing, that in terms of the romanticism, I think unfortunately there's a lot of romanticism about hard work for our generation. Like, we wear it like a badge of honor. For example, if you work like a 70-hour week, like people act as if it's something to be proud of. But it's not really. Like, you're working yourself so hard. And people say, oh, it's my passion to work hard, but there's a lot to experience in life. Like, your passion is one thing, but there are other things to experience. There's so much that life has to offer. So, like, try and make use of that as well. Like, it's okay if, like, for 2-3 days you don't work, if you take a holiday and just rest and just I don't know, draw something, or go walking or reading, or doing regular things. Like, I think that should not be sort of looked down upon, and sort of, you don't need to always be moving in life like 100 miles per hour. It's okay to move at 1 mile per hour as well.
That's so true. That is so true. I think hustle culture is one of the most damaging things to come out of our generation. And one of my worst nightmares is that I turn into someone that is just working 24/7. There, like you said, there is so much more to life than just working and working and working. Small things, like you mentioned, just coming home and just doing something that you enjoy, drawing, whatever it is. And in terms of the abundance of choice that you were talking about, I've seen it on the internet being called the Netflix paradox. So you have an endless amount of choices, but then you end up doing nothing almost. You just end up feeling paralyzed and not choosing anything in the end. So the third and final letter that I want to talk about is one of the most interesting, and I really want to know your view on this. And so it's called Dear Negative Mindset. And in this letter, you touch upon the fact that sometimes we engage with a lot of material in the form of YouTube videos, articles, and books that say that if you're in a situation where you're feeling down or something's not right, then your way out is a positive mindset. But what I love about your book is that you touch upon the fact that we're not machines. We're humans. We're not programmed to think one way all the time. And you you kind of touch upon the fact that pushing yourself into a positive mindset all the time can actually be harmful sometimes. So I just want to know your view on the mindfulness industry. It's arguably one of the biggest industries at the moment. And don't get me wrong, there are people out there that are genuinely trying to help and just pass on the skills that they've learned. But there are also a lot of people out there, I think, that are just trying to push their own agendas under the umbrella of mindfulness. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things is that we have to be appreciative of everyone's circumstances. Like I think that's what I often say in the book, is that yes, it worked for me, but your circumstances are different. You need to be aware of that and sort of like, it worked for me in that moment, but I'm not going to say that's the only way, because there are 100 different ways, at least, probably, to sort of solving things or like managing things. With mindfulness, I think much more than mindfulness, I think it's about being aware of your own thinking. Like, probably that might be the definition of mindfulness. I'm not sure, but I think it's but I think just noticing what your patterns are of thinking, like, and noticing what triggers you in a certain direction, and say if it triggers you in a positive direction, being aware of that. If it triggers you in a negative way, be aware of that as well. And we're not looking to be 100% happy all the time. I think we're looking to find balance in things, like a balanced perspective on, okay, I'm feeling down today, but that doesn't mean that my whole life is down. Like,
exactly.
I think also sometimes, like for me, I mentioned this to a friend the other day. It was like, suppose one thing in a day goes really bad, or like feels bad, then my whole sort of memory of that day looks bad. Like I think of that day as fully bad, but it wasn't really, like, because the morning might have been really good, like might have had a nice run or a nice walk in the park, or like, so it's important to sort of be real and be honest with what has really happened during the day, and not just letting your one memory or your one negative memory or one positive memory just overcloud your judgment of that whole day itself.
Yeah.
Like, so in a sense of, okay, one bad thing happened, but there are also 9 good things that happened. So in a sense, if you want to look at it in percentage terms, 90% of the day was good. But because that bad thing was so bad, my whole sort of memory of that day looks really bad. So I think it's just, it's more about, I think what everyone is trying to just suggest is that be aware of your own thinking. And I think that's the way to go, and not be constantly positive. I think it's just about being balanced. More than positive, being balanced in the way you look at things.
I think it's worth kind of acknowledging, when we're talking about mental health and all the other related topics, that it's okay to not feel okay. Sometimes when you consume too much of this mindfulness material on YouTube or whatever it is, it can seem as if you're doing something wrong with your life, and in a way it can push you into thinking that you're even worse than you initially thought. So yeah, in terms of easing yourself into positivity, other than kind of keeping tabs on the positive things that happened during the day, and kind of reminding yourself that the day wasn't completely terrible, is there any other way that you've personally used to make sure that you kind of switch into a positive frame of thought?
Yeah, I think one of the things is that having less expectations of yourself. Like, it's really challenging because we want to push ourselves to be the best version every day, and we want to be the best version of ourselves all the time. But I think it's important to acknowledge, like you said, it's okay if you have a few bad days initially, or times that are difficult, and sort of you need to give yourself that space to sort of adjust your way of thinking and like manage yourself in a much more safer and better way for your own life. I think that's crucial. And I think, yeah, again, it comes back to that having a lack of expectation on yourself in these kind of moments is really beneficial. And of course, you need the luck. You need to be lucky in terms of having the support of people around you, and for them also to not have expectations of you during this time. Because sometimes, we allow others' expectations to come into our own mind, and like that impacts us. But you can't let others' expectations sort of become added clouds in your own mind. Like, you just allow the clouds in your own mind to pass themselves and not add extra clouds yourself. So I think that's one key thing in terms of having less of an expectation with yourself, and being okay with, as you say, not being okay in that sense. Yeah.
Before we kind of wrap things up, I just want to say to anyone that's going through something similar, I'd say pick up your book on Amazon. As you mentioned earlier, none of the proceeds are going to your bank account. They're going to the Mental Health Foundation. And this book, unlike a lot of the mindfulness and mental health related books that I've seen and read, this is more like a supportive friend. And if you just want that friendly voice to accompany you through this journey, then I'd say please have a look at Yash's book. And is there anything that you like to say to those listening right now, going through similar experiences? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think more than giving advice, or more than sort of and having suggestions, I think just know that I'm on this journey with you as well. I think like we all like to be similar to other people, and we all like to know that we're not alone. And I think through this book, I just want to sort of make it clear to people that they might think they're alone, and they might think that there's no one else feeling that the way they do. And I'm not saying that I completely understand their point of view also, because everyone's situation is different. This is one of those things that is very individual, as we mentioned. But I think, as I mentioned as well, like a problem like this is better solved with two people rather than one. So I'm happy to be that second person for people who might feel that they're alone. And I think that's the only thing that I would say is that. And that sometimes I find, it's about being there to listen for people, because rather than me giving suggestions or you giving suggestions to people, I think if we can be there for people, for them to say what they want and without judgment, I think that's the message that I want to get across from this book. In a sense, so just in a sense, know that you're not alone, because I'm there with you every step of the way.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much.